Back in 2002, I made a friend. We were both 11 years old and had joined a school at the same time. This was something that we bonded over, but something that bonded us much more was something we shared a great passion for: video games. This friend was the first that shared such a love for games as I. And although there were certain games that we both liked, like the newly released Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, we differed in the genre of games we would buy. I went for action-adventures, first-person shooters and sports, whereas he preferred RPGs, platformers and beat-em-ups. It was this friend who introduced me to the game Devil May Cry. Normally, we would lend each other PlayStation 2 games in order to try out one another's recommendations. The story of the day my friend lent Devil May Cry says a lot about my passion for video games. That day, my friend and I were walking through town. We were walking back from his house to mine. Along the way, game box cover in my hand, we started a conversation with two older teenage girls. I don't remember the content of the chat, but the context was undoubtedly flirtatious. For my friend, this was commonplace, but for me, this was anything but. I was backward. As my friend was led by these two girls behind a public library to become a man, I sat on a step, feeling awkward and beta as fuck. After a short wait, I gave up and went back home eager to play this new game. I then understood everything my friend told me about Devil May Cry. What I remember from that night wasn't that I regretted turning down what could have been. It was that this game is great. Since that night, Devil May Cry has been a staple of my video gaming life, and the story of how I got it is, I'm sure, one of tens of thousands that could be told. The game that has spanned 3 sequels, a prequel, and a reboot. The game that has created one of gaming's most recognizable protagonists. An animated show, and arguably a subgenre. This is Devil May Cry. Released in Japan in the summer of 2001, and later that year across the rest of the world, Devil May Cry was a PlayStation 2 title, published by Capcom and developed by Team Little Devils, with Hideki Kamiya leading the helm as director. Originally stated as development as Resident Evil 4, the project soon shifted into its own unique course after being deemed too otherworldly for a game in the Resident Evil series. The game starts off with a narration. It tells of the story of Sparta, a demon from the underworld who defended humanity from the very forces of evil that he was part of. This sets up the plot, and it clearly emphasizes the demonic tone. Post-narrative is the first time we see the main protagonist, Dante. We quickly learn that elements of the underworld exist in the human world, with the sword-impaled trophy heads on his office wall. Suddenly, an entrance that could only be considered as modest. Which leads to this erratic response.
Whoa, slow down, babe.
This woman, who couldn't be bothered to knock first, Trish, confronts Dante with questions that reveal that he is the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. This leads to a tension-building exchange that ends up being a short fight. After this, Trish immediately eases the atmosphere by telling Dante that she is not an enemy.
But I'm not your enemy.
She then explains the purpose of her visit is to seek his help to prevent Mundus, the emperor of the underworld, from gaining control of the human world. Oh, and Trish looks like his mom. Trish and Dante go to Malay Island, where Mundus hopes to portal his way to the human world, and, without explanation, Trish screws off, leaving you alone. If you didn't know what Devil May Cry was going to be like, gameplay-wise, you certainly didn't from the first 5 minutes or so, unless you watched the trailers or seen gameplay elsewhere. When you reach the castle, you realise that the game divides itself into missions, which there are 23 of. That first 5 minutes of gameplay that I mentioned serves as a way to get your bearings of the very basics of its controls. You can walk, run, jump, double jump off walls on some surfaces, and even dodge enemy attacks. To progress through the castle's main entrance, you first have to collect something called red orbs. This introduces you to the concept of collectible and redeemable orbs to enhance gameplay. More on that later. The eerie vibe the castle sets, from its ominous music to its lore, gives you a sense that something has got to give. When you find the key to progress, apologies, the rusty key, you meet your first enemy. Enemies in Devil May Cry are visually varied, memorable, and have an assortment of attacks that make them stand out and offer a new challenge along the way. There are 15 base enemies, with some having their own category, such as the marionettes and the sins. A number of these enemies feel like mini boss battles in their own right. My favourite of the lesser demon bunch would have to be Shadow, with its cool look and because it can be difficult when you're in combat against more than one at a time. During your first series of battles, you will notice the stylish rank. This goes from dull all the way up to stylish. The more you vary your hacking, shooting and slicing of enemies, the higher your grade. Get hit or repeat the same attacks over and over, the lower the grade you will receive. Once you complete the first mission, you will be graded in the same manner for your overall performance. This is determined on your average stylish rank, total damage taken, using items to assist you, and, if you croak it, the higher your mission ranking, the higher your reward. Red orbs. Which brings us to a feature that makes good use of those collected orbs, and that is the ability to redeem them for new abilities, items, and other types of orbs. Yellow were used to continue from your current low point after you die. Green orbs can only come from some defeated demons and recover some of your lost health. Blue orbs increase your maximum health. There are also blue orb fragments you can collect. Every 4 equals a whole blue orb. Purple orbs are used to increase your Devil Trigger gauge. All of those orbs, excluding green, can be bought from the Divinity statue. You can also buy stars that, when used, recover some health or make you invincible. Early in Mission 2, we are introduced to Alistair, a sword infused with lightning. Along with its increased strength compared to your starting sword, the Force Edge, you will also unlock Devil Trigger. Devil Trigger enhances Dante's sword and gun attacks. You're capable of performing crushing new types of attacks, most of which you can purchase. This adds to the variation of Dante's combat skills. Devil Trigger has to be earned by hitting enemies. You then hit L1, and when you've depleted it, it ends and the process restarts. It makes you consider when best to use it. Alistair and Devil Trigger definitely come in handy in Mission 3, where you encounter your first boss battle, Phantom. This is your first real test of the game and makes you take into account what you could buy prior, just in case you get into a bind. When fighting Phantom for your very first time, you get a real impression, which sticks through during the entire game, that it is difficult. Devil May Cry is tough. How tough? Well, when you start the game and you die several times during the first few missions, you're given the option of dropping the difficulty to easy. Firstly, easy isn't ridiculously simple for a first-time player. However, it does replace harder enemies at some points with less difficult ones. Secondly, the mode alters some of the controls and simplifies the combat combinations. And finally, you can't select your difficulty the first time you play, so until you prove you aren't worthy of the default difficulty, you're thrown into the deep end from minute one. The game has a weight of depth to it. To everything I previously mentioned, several other weapons, hidden red and blue orbs. Ifrit, which, like Alistair, you can upgrade with the Affinity statue, and brings more ways you can diverge your combat style. The game isn't entirely restricted to the quest throughout Malay Island to stop Mundus. Optional secret missions, of which there are 12, are a way of taking a break, away from the plot to do something else for a short while. If successful, you're rewarded with a blue orb fragment. Secret missions are an excellent addition to the game because, as I mentioned, they let you take a breather and allow you to challenge yourself, to use the game mechanics in an entirely different way. Oh, and secret missions are called secret for a good reason. Some are really tough to find. What makes Devil May Cry do better than most games of its time is its underwater section. Just kidding. No, not that. But its boss battles. There are 5 boss battles throughout the game. Phantom, Nilo Angelo, Griffin, Nightmare, and the main antagonist, Mundus. If you've played the game, you will have noticed that you face all bosses 3 times. Each time they build in difficulty, with the addition of a different attack level at you, for example. Your third battle with these bosses are set as an epic fight that results in their climactic demise. All 5 bosses have a little character, and although you would like to discover more about them, they still give you a sense of their motives. All 3 boss battles with Nilo Angelo, or Virgil, Dante's corrupted twin brother and pawn of Mundus, are of my favourite boss battles of the game, and perhaps the entire franchise. This is due to the dualistic tone, with both Dante and Nilo Angelo having similar fighting styles, and them both having swords as their primary weapons. It is also because both Dante and Nilo have an element of respect for one another. Fighting the closest demon in Malay Island to Dante, with a sweet soundtrack in the background, is just terrific. From something Devil May Cry does well to what it doesn't, the camera. In a game where you sometimes double jump your way in order to progress throughout the game, the camera matters. Early in the days of the PS2, third-person cameras were mostly fixed and static. Controllable third-person cameras were few and far between, and for good reason. Some games did it horribly. Devil May Cry's fixed camera hinders its platforming, as there's many times you don't know what direction the camera will fix itself to next. This is frustrating even to someone who has played the game many times. It does take some of the fun of what it could have been, but it can be quickly forgotten about and isn't game breaking at its worst. Devil May Cry is known for what it does best, combat. And in its defense, you can forgive its camera problems today when it is 18 years since its release. And between then and now, you've had many games that have had terrible camera problems. And I'm sure to the gamers out there, you know this is true. Another problem that doesn't ruin the game but still irks fans is its plot. As you complete more missions and defeat more of Mundus's pawns, you get the feeling that the bulk of the plot will reside when you confront Mundus. After you finally defeat Griffin, your battered foe begs Mundus for
one last surge of power. The power to finish him.
Mundus, now seemingly perceived by demons as a god type, rejects Griffin's pleas and ruthlessly kills him. Dante then realizes Mundus is the one who killed his mother and brother, and promptly vows to
kill Mundus.
This isn't the only way the adventure becomes personal for Dante. After a final showdown with Nilo Angelo, Dante finds out that Nilo is actually his twin brother Virgil. Once you make it to the underworld, Trish shows her true colours and betrays you. Dante saves her though, and then this happens.
Dante!
Don't come any closer, you devil! You may look like my mother, but you're nowhere close to her. You have no soul. You have the face, but you'll never have her fire!
After you finally confront Mundus, Trish, for some reason, sacrifices herself to save you from him. Before this, Trish is a damsel in distress, and Dante likes her again. Which, all in all, makes me think about Trish's peculiar journey throughout the game. Trish attacks Dante, Trish claims she's not his
Enemy.
Trish fucks off, follows you on your journey from afar, attacks you, needs Dante to save her, looks upset, is held by Mundus, sacrifices herself to save Dante, dies, comes back to life to help Dante defeat Mundus, cries, and when Dante and Trish escape the self-destructing Malay Island, proclaims herself as
His sidekick.
Yeah, you get my point. It is a shame we don't get to delve deeper into Mundus's character. Aside from 3 visually dazzling battles against him, you learn very little about Mundus and his deep dark desire to conquer the human world. Essentially, Mundus is the ultimate foe, but nothing more than an underworld god that once fought Sparta, killed Dante's mother, and enslaved his twin brother. Cliched, yeah, and disappointing, but it can be overlooked. When someone asks Devil May Cry fans, tell us about the game, the plot would barely get a mention. It is a filler of a storyline, but in my controversial opinion, there is one gem.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Depth of character in the game only really extends to Dante, and that's okay because it launched a household name. Not in the same levels as Lara Croft or Mario, but still at iconic levels. The game launched a franchise, though undoubtedly rocky, will have soon spanned 3 console generations with the upcoming release of Devil May Cry 5. The original Devil May Cry was also remade in a bundle with 2 and 3, and I'll get to those soon. From Dante's carefree attitude that turns into a personal journey, to building up stylish combos against difficult enemies, all while head-banging rock track plays. It makes me ponder the question, if I was to do it all again and I was 11, would I have chosen time with 2 keen teenagers, or would I have went home to play Devil May Cry? Yeah, a clear winner, but I didn't choose too badly that night either. See you next time. Thank you for watching, and if you have anything to say about my review, good or bad, leave a comment down below, and please click the big red button to subscribe. It really helps me when you do that, and click the bell to allow notifications so you never miss a new video.